It is Kevin Purcell and the Theotek podcast, along with my friends. Wes Allen is here. Hi, Wes.
Hey, how you doing?
And, of course, Rick Mansfield is here.
Good morning.
Rick was a little bit under the weather last time we all did this, and so we're glad that he's back with us, feeling a lot better. And then LaRosa is there. Hey, LaRosa. Good morning. LaRosa Johnson. Just as a let everybody know, LaRosa is with Olive Tree Bible Software, and Rick is with Accordance Bible Software. We're not really going to talk Bible software today, but I think it's a good idea that people know that. And then, of course, Wes, you know, he's a tech guru with the American Baptist Churches of New Jersey, and I'm just a lowly little pastor. Anyway, so we're here today to talk tech, and what we wanted to do today is on this, the first podcast of December, is talk about your church tech problems, and we're imagining some that you might have. What happened was a couple of weeks ago, I went to take my son to North Greenville University, and my son Daniel is planning to go there, and he's actually going to major in their mass communications department, and one of the emphases that they have there is church technology. Which is interesting, and a good friend of mine that I grew up with, his name is Andy Stevens. He teaches down there. He teaches a church media class, and that's the class we got to sit in, so my son could enjoy finding out what college life was a little bit like. And they had a bunch of case studies of problems in their churches, and so we thought we'd sort of take that idea. What tech problems do churches have? And we're going to try to offer some solutions based on our experiences and things that we know about. And so each one of us will kind of jump in here and share those things. And it might be a computer-related thing. It might be a media-related thing, those kinds of things based on our own personal experience. So let's jump off with one that is often a common problem that churches face when they decide to get into doing visual media in their worship service. They'll buy a projector, they'll hang it up, point it at a wall, and then they realize there's a problem. It's not bright enough. Their room is too bright for the projector they bought. The projector they bought is too dim. Or something that we're experiencing at High Peak Baptist Church, where I'm a pastor, is over time a projector gets dimmer and dimmer. The life of the bulb slowly degrades. And so if you've got that thing for a couple of years, it was maybe really bright and perfect the first day you got it, but then 2 years or 3 years later, it's not quite as bright as it used to be. It doesn't mean the bulb's about to go out. You don't want to spend $300 or $400 on a new bulb because you'd have to do that every year in order to keep it as bright as it was the first day you bought it. So what are some things that maybe a church could do to fix a problem like that? Have any of you experienced that, and who has an idea of what you could do?
Well, my first thing is when you buy a projector, one of the things you have to say is, I'm really getting echo, Kevin. One of the things you have to say is, or look at, is how much does the replacement bulb cost? Because you said $300, $400, and you don't want to be doing that every 2-3 years. So make sure that you understand that's part of the cost of the projector. The second thing, if you want to extend the life of your projector, what I actually do is I run my lamp at economy mode, so it dims the brightness a little bit, but it extends the lamp hours, so that dimming effect that you get is not as great over time. You don't notice it. So the projector I have right now, we've been using it for 3 years. The bulb that's in there, because one of the bulbs died when our motherboard went on the projector. That bulb is 2 years old, and it's still totally usable in our space. So that economy mode is a really good basis, especially when you're talking like small church sanctuary. You know, a 2500 lumen projector is going to be enough if you're doing short throw, and you put that on economy mode, and that'll work.
Well, you said that a 2500 lumen projector is going to be enough on economy mode in a small sanctuary, which probably a lot of people listening to this do have smaller sanctuaries.
That's where I live, yeah.
But I would say you have to be careful with that. Just going by the lumen number, that can be misleading, because a lot of times, they'll say that's the advertising number,
Right.
but maybe one of the more important numbers to go with is the combination of that plus the contrast ratio.
Yeah.
Both of those are advertising numbers, and there's no standard, and so they can sort of I don't know what the right term for it is. That they can sort of overinflate the values of those numbers, and so be careful. But
it's like the battery life on a Windows laptop.
What you're saying basically is you're saying to avoid this problem, make certain that you put it on economy mode and test the brightness. And if it's bright enough, then over time it's going to be fine. Because what you can do is if it does start to dim, you can take it off economy mode, right?
Yeah, and it'll accelerate the degradation of the lamp. But I mean, it's it's gonna fade eventually, but you can extend that time out to where it's still going to be usable.
But that would be sort of a good first step. Let's say you have been running it on economy mode and it's dim, and so you say, look, okay, I understand this is going to degrade the bulb, but it's cheaper than getting a brighter projector. So let's go ahead and take it off economy mode and see if that fixes the problem.
And then the other good thing about economy mode is that it doesn't kick in the fan as much.
Okay, so
sometimes when their projectors hit the fan up, oh my gosh, it takes up the whole room.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have another suggestion though? Because that's take it off economy mode. That might help. Are there other ways to make a projector seem brighter even though you're not getting a new projector?
Well, part of it is to think about it before you implement it. Now a lot of churches have them now, but I remember when I was associate pastor at a church, and this was kind of the project that the senior pastor put me in charge of, and we did not take into consideration when we were looking at this just all the light coming into the sanctuary, and our initial projector that we bought, because this was the 90s and we bought it used, and and it was not adequate, and we were quickly trying to cover up windows. These windows that we had spent money on to look really nice in there, we were now covering them up, and so it's one of those things. Even if you borrow a projector first and just play with this before you start investing in it, to really know all of the dynamics involved in it. The other thing, of course, again back in the 90s, we didn't have adequate wiring, and this was before anything could be done wirelessly, and so I was positioned with a Toshiba laptop running PowerPoint. We were running PowerPoint back then, with a 50-foot VGA cable, and I was hidden behind fake plants up on the platform up front. Because all of a sudden the pastor wanted to do this, but we really didn't have a good plan in place. And so, I would just say do a lot of your homework up front. I don't think you'll have some of those same problems that we did back then, but that still there's problems you don't anticipate.
Yeah, the thing about churches is they're always looking for the cheapest solution first.
Right.
And most of these technology consultants that you talk to will say, you can buy cheap, but that means you're going to buy twice.
Right.
And in the long run, it's going to be more expensive. And so don't make the mistakes that I made, because we're having this problem in our fellowship hall. I bought cheap, and it's because it's the fellowship hall, it's not a top priority. So it's never going to be replaced, and so we're just going to deal with it. So what we do is we turn off the lights. If I'm showing video, the lights are off. And that's not always an ideal solution. This past Wednesday night, we did missions prayer night, and our denomination sends out videos about the missionaries that they're highlighting for the year. So there were these 6 videos, and we showed a 2-minute video, and then we prayed for that missionary in that country. And then I showed another one. So we've got the lights going on and off all evening long.
And I'll tell you another problem with turning off the lights. Granted, a lot of us are looking at, if we're listening to a pastor, some of us, like probably all of us in this conversation, are probably looking at electronic devices, to follow along with the scriptures. But there's still a lot of people in that congregation who are using print Bibles, and you shut off the lights, they can't see their Bibles anymore.
Yeah, that's true if you're doing something where they're accessing their scriptures, like showing a PowerPoint with the scriptures or something.
Right.
Anybody else have another solution, besides, pre-plan, which is obviously the best, but that's too late now for someone who's in this. What if we were meeting in our sanctuary with the problem I've got in my fellowship hall, and
I mean,
what would you say to me to help with that problem?
one of the things you want to do is don't leave it on default. Change your use, because the projectors have modes, and so you can put it on. PC is usually generally a higher contrast with a little more the brightness level turned up. You can manually edit the settings, kind of like the way you used to edit like an old analog television, like up the brightness, or you can still do that with digital too. And you can up the contrast and the brightness to make it appear brighter. But the problem is with that is that a lot of times the highlights are going to just completely wash out. But the one thing you can do is just, I'm plugged in with a computer cable, so put it on computer mode. That's generally a really good idea.
Okay. We just want to welcome Antoine Wright, joined us. He jumped on just a little bit late. Antoine, we're talking church tech problems and our solutions to them. And one of the the first tech problem that we're dealing with is what happens if your projector's too dim and you're not ready to buy a new one? And so, do you have any thoughts on that? Any suggestions? We've already talked about, don't do that in the first place. That's the first one. Second is to take it off economy mode. Third is to adjust the settings to maybe brighten it a little bit using the computer setting and increase the brightness and the contrast. Any other ideas of how we could fix that problem, make it a little bit more palatable?
Yeah, I think when it came in, I heard pre-planning as part of a solution there. Because I've had too many instances of a projector either going out, being dim, or shifted very far to the left kind of thing, I always try to make sure that for whatever I'm projecting, that there's also some kind of live URL available to those items for those persons that can access that item. Because even if it is too dim, you may not be able to fix that immediately. You may not have, sometimes in my case, I didn't have any kind of access to any of the manual settings when I was in Australia. Everything in the projector shifted to the left every time somebody new connected to the projector. There was a really weird default setup, and so we just tried to make the plan around that. It was like, well, just have your stuff available online so that the folks that can access that, and then maybe shoot an email to a secretary or somebody who's got access to a copy or printer to maybe have higher fidelity, higher contrast versions of whatever it is you're projecting.
That's a good point. I hear two things in what you said. The first is have it available online, and the second is produce the content in a higher contrast kind. So what you're saying is make your graphics with a higher contrast, not with lots of complex backgrounds behind words. Is that what you're saying? And then also the other side of that is to have it available offline. Talk about the first one though. Your second, what I just said, is the first, and that is higher contrast material. What does that mean by that?
Definitely what I mean by higher contrast. I'm a very big proponent of not having a whole lot of graphics on your slides to begin with, having very clear distinctions between header text and bullet text and images, graphs on your slides. So if at all possible, the projected version for me, because I'm projecting from a mobile, usually is the high contrast version, and then the available version, the print version, if you will, or the slideshare.net version, is the lower fidelity version, the one that I can kind of get away with having a little bit more stuff going on, because people are going to view that in a more personal setting. So anything that's going to be projected that goes out, definitely having the simpler to read, the easier read iteration of that. But then the other side of that, obviously, that second part of that point is have a print version available, or at least a personally available online version. So.
What's the best way to make that available online for people in your church?
If you've got if you're doing everything on a slide deck or any of the worship software, they usually can package everything, as long as you're not doing any kind of edits right now, kind of moments, or you don't mind the edit right now, you could actually package all of those and upload those to either a Dropbox, box.net. If you want to do slide shares, you can do places like slideshare.net, which I've always found is pretty cool. It's just slides. That's all it is. There's no transitions, no anything else of that sort. Those are two that I use, fairly often, and that pretty much grabs everybody. And OneDrive. Sorry, I have a group that I do OneDrive with.
Antoine, there's an aspect to what you're describing here that has been a part of my personal, teaching and preaching presentation philosophy for the last 20 years or so. To ask myself the question ahead of time, what do I do if the technology fails? Mm-hmm. In the middle of it, and that's something you have to think. Can I? The corollary question is, can I still present what I want to present if the technology fails?
That's why I always create my visuals the absolute last thing. Because
I do too.
I have had a projector literally explode right before my sermon.
Well, it's not even just a projector. I wouldn't even say just a projector failing. I've had everything fail except for my phone. When I was using my phone to speak, and I actually had to know the content enough to not have my face in my phone screen when everything else failed.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I don't preach every week. I usually teach every week, but occasionally when I preach, I prefer to preach from my iPad. I put the manuscript on the iPad. I've done that for the last few years. But my wife is usually in the back with a paper copy, just in case. I've thought through, okay, what do I do if my iPad just quits working? Because you just never know what's going to happen. And if we have time, I'll tell a real quick story. Way back when I was in college, you've heard from Star Trek, the Kobayashi Maru. That's the unwinnable situation. Yeah, the no-win situation. And my undergrad was in English education, and so I was student teaching with some high school students, senior English, and I was barely older than they were. And I had a supervisor who was really, really tough, and she was coming out to observe me, and I'd heard that she would sabotage your presentation just to see how you reacted to it. How do you respond when it doesn't go the way you plan it? And so I thought through everything that I was doing. I had a backup for everything that I was doing, and so I go, and so they had called me out of the room, a few minutes before class, and I think this was where she was sabotaging things. This was back in the day when we were using overhead transparencies, and so I had my overhead transparency set up. I put it down on the screen. I turn on the projector, and the projector didn't work. And so, back in the day, I had a whole class in like AV, equipment, and so I opened up the projector, and back then they used to keep the extra bulbs underneath there. The extra bulb was missing. She took the extra bulb again just to see what I would do, and so I said, "That's okay. I've got handouts," and I pulled out handouts, and I had handouts of everything that I was about to put on the screen, which normally would probably be a waste of paper, but I was doing it in that situation, and that taught me a valuable lesson that I've learned to this day. Whether I'm teaching in a classroom, I'm teaching in a church, I'm preaching in a church. What will happen if the technology doesn't work? I assume I'm not going to be sabotaged, but what's going to happen if it just fails for natural reasons, and of course the downside of that is when I'm doing an accordance presentation, if the technology fails, I'm dead in the water because that's technology based. But teaching the Bible does not require technology. It's an aid. It makes it it helps it out, but I should still be able to do that if the technology fails.
So what I hear you saying, Rick, is if our problem is that our technology is essentially somewhat failing every week because it's too dim or too, not high enough contrast or whatever. So what you're saying is plan for it already and then make those available to people who are struggling to see it.
But now if it's failing every week, fix it before next week.
Yeah, and
the problem is sometimes you can't fix it. Sometimes people just don't have the money to buy a new projector or to get it brighter.
Well, if my projector was failing every week, I wouldn't use the projector until I could afford a new one.
There you go.
Well, that's okay. There's another solution. Just quit using it until you can get a new one. But I think some people might be on like they're sort of on that marginal, and maybe there's a couple things they could do to make it usable.
But you know, one thing Antoine has said over and over, and I agree with him, is that you don't want your technology to be focused, the focus of it. You know, you want that to be supplemental to what you're trying to communicate. It should be aiding that, and so you don't want your technology to become a distraction.
Right.
And that's my general philosophy. My visuals are usually designed to be non-essential to the communication. They are supplemental. They're aids. They're for helping people to internalize and memorize it, so they accentuate stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I don't preach from a manuscript. I actually take like where my bullet points are going to be, so where the builds come up on the slide. I put them in presentation notes because it's partly how I memorize what I'm going to say. So if everything fails and I'm left without my iPad or anything, I can still communicate what I wanted to say because I've worked through the process enough to where I'm fine, to whether I have that or not. You can't use technology as a crutch to get over your inadequacies. You have to master your material and master what you're trying to communicate before you even attempt to apply a technology addition to what you are saying. And that goes all the way down to something like using a microphone.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're so reliant on the technology to get your message across, then you need to make your message better.
Yeah, you're not really communicating. You're just
when I used to teach communication
another
class.
solution before we move on here, and that is this is sort of in the line of what Antoine was talking about. I didn't even think about it, and that is a solution like this. If you use the Bible app, you can have your church sign up for YouVersion Live, and what that is, people will download the Bible app on their tablet or their phone, and you can sort of create a presentation in this that then people can follow while you're preaching or teaching or show announcement slides or prayer requests. It even can give a link for how to give, those kinds of things. And then also Logos has Proclaim Online, which I don't think this is their website, is it? It doesn't look like it. Anyway, yeah, actually it is. It looks so different. I haven't been here in a long time. It's not my favorite church presentation software. In fact, I tried it to use it at our church for a while, and it takes forever to build. But it's a solution. They do the same kind of thing. You could open up your Logos or Faith Life Bible apps and follow a presentation from within the app as well. And so those are two possible solutions. Before we move on, though, LaRosa, you haven't really chimed in on this. Is there any suggestions or thoughts that you have on it?
No, I mean, just kind of really reiterate what everyone else has already said. Just kind of really know material, and then just having lots of backups necessary, readily available for you when those things do fail.
Okay, well, let's look at another church tech problem that people will often face. Let's say you want to make Wi-Fi available in your church, so that people can use things. Let's say you decide we're gonna use the Bible app so that people can see the presentations, or we're gonna put a link up to say if you want to download the PDF of this presentation so you can follow it from your phone or your tablet. Here's the link. Go download it from highpeakchurch.com/sermons or something, whatever. How do you make that Wi-Fi so that everyone can get on and everyone can download safely and securely? All right. So there's three issues here. Number one is, how do you make the Wi-Fi good enough so that everyone in your sanctuary, or really everyone in your building, because maybe you got people down in the nursery and they've got the sound coming in over a little thing, but they want to be able to see it. I don't know, maybe that's not a good solution because they need to be watching the kids. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, that or an overflow room or whatever. Anyway, you want to make Wi-Fi available throughout the building. Number one, you want it to be safe and secure. That's the number three. I said there's three. I don't know what my third one is. But anyway, you guys get the idea. So have at it. Who wants to chime in first on this?
You see, I'm kind of out of this because our church, we're stuck with DSL. It's the only thing we can afford. And so when you start putting 70 people on 1.5 megabits down, You're quickly going to dial-up speeds.
Yeah, limit your expectations. In other words.
Yeah, I mean, I
Might not be a good
have
idea for
a
you to try
guest
that.
network set up. We have a DSL modem in the office, and I have well, you put me on it. I got an Ethernet over power line to running it into a Netgear router, and I'm running it off of DDWRT, which is a open source firmware that the FCC wants to make illegal. And and I have a guest network set up, but most people don't use it because nowadays they all got phones, and so they're just like, yeah, the Wi-Fi is like it's a convenience for most people now.
I think that's something, to consider. Do we need to have Wi-Fi? Because most people with mobile devices, especially phones, might have phones will definitely have a cellular connection anyway, data connection. We have Wi-Fi. We have two main buildings at our church, and we have Wi-Fi in both. We have separate, Wi-Fi routers, but it's never great Wi-Fi. It's adequate Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
The one thing you do need to consider is if you're going to have people come to your church for meetings that are going to last, 2, 3, 4 hours, that they, like we've occasionally had, these like associational meetings and things like that where people are going to bring laptops. You want to make sure that you have Wi-Fi for those kinds of purposes. But if it's just for people sitting there during the congregation, they can probably do it on their phones. It's a matter of thinking about whether or not you really need it.
And you really, I mean, to make a network that's able to handle like 100, 150 people, I mean, you really need to be careful with how you're spreading out your the bandwidth on the network. Like I remember just when we had the accordance training here, I literally ran an Ethernet cable from my house to the church because the church didn't have its own Wi-Fi connection network. I'd set up a couple of routers as a guest network. There was maybe 45 people there. They melted those two routers because you get 4 people going, "Oh, I'm just going to go to YouTube now," and all of a sudden this stupid router just explodes. And with newer technology, that is mitigated a little bit, but it's getting to the point now where people are just going to tether to their mobile devices. Go ahead, Antoine.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the churches I used to be a part of, we used to offer guest Wi-Fi, and that was one of our, it fell under AV, and I've fallen under the AV department to figure out how it's going to work. The assumption was that everybody was going to use it. Nobody used it, or at least not a lot of people used it, because they came in with their phones. But the folks that we did have, they were heavy users of it. So we intentionally did a few things. We filtered it on the router level so that you can only go certain places, Bible.com, Bible Gateway, etc., things of that sort. So there's only certain places you can go. And then we actually dropped the speed down to a very intolerable state. So that anybody who figured their way around it, they still ran into just enough of a speed bump. There wasn't a lot of a speed bump when it came to going to a Bible Gateway or Logos.com or anything of that sort. We also ran 2 networks. So we provisioned a set of access points that were in the sanctuary were the ones that were heavily filtered, quite well slowed down. But then we also ran a little more wide open network in our foyer. We were a fairly large church, about 1,100 people. So we had a very decent sized foyer, and we used areas that connected to the foyer for meeting spaces. So we did that one we opened up the connection a little bit more there, but everybody got the very nasty login screen. Hey, please accept that you're using this network. It's a shared resource, et cetera, et cetera. Those kind of things we did, and that helped that helped just keep the Wi-Fi usable, but not overly frequent. Before I left, we were actually exploring how to do an employee or staff-only network that had a little bit more bandwidth to it. I'm pretty certain that they pulled it off because they have some folks that are defense contractors that do that kind of thing. That's part of our members. So they were able to pull. I'm sure they were able to pull that off. But those were ways that we, when we thought about Wi-Fi, that we had to actually think through not necessarily what people are doing right now, but what people would be doing with Wi-Fi. And so, because you can't catch everything, we just use the idea of a hard filter and speed to really to not make it unusable, but to make sure that it wouldn't be abused.
And another solution that you have, if you're trying to make like worship materials available, and it's one of these future projects that I keep thinking about doing, and I'll probably end up provisioning my Raspberry Pi for this. But you can set up a router that's not connected to the internet, but it creates a Wi-Fi signal, and set up like a Raspberry Pi or something like that with a local DNS setting, and put it up. This is worship. It's no internet, but it's for worship materials. And you can put your visuals and all that stuff on there, and play with that. So that's one way to kind of get around. That's how I almost would want to do like retreats, is to throw up my own router and put it in, kind of like what the Bible routers do, that Antoine puts out. To be like, okay, connect to here. You will not have internet access, but you're going to have access to, the map of the building and the program that we're going through and all the supplementary readings. So connect to this, and you'll be able to connect to do all these things. The other cool thing with that is that's the way I do the remote for. We use OpenLP. I've said that before for our lyrics, and that has a thing called Stage View. And I have 3 or 4 people that when I have the whole thing configured right, they connect to Stage View on their phone or their tablet. I have my little 90-year-old who does it, and that's how she looks at the lyrics, because it changes for her. So you gain a benefit for that too, and it's because it's just local. You're not worried about a whole bunch of people coming in or doing things insecurely, or this is literally the only place that you can go when you're connected to this network, and you advertise it that way. And I think that's a good halfway point for a lot of things.
Let me ask everyone's opinion on this. Let me give you the situation at our church. We have password-protected Wi-Fi, but everyone knows the password. Is that a good idea or not?
My guest network, everybody knows the password for that.
Yeah.
But not.
But I mean, it's almost like, why do you have a password if everyone's going to know the password?
Because I don't want people driving down the street just connecting to the network. I mean, that really.
That would be one. I was going to say, that would be one reason to have it. The other reason is, you use that password, and probably you guys are giving the password to everybody, kind of as, hey, if you're here and you're part of the community, here's our Wi-Fi password, kind of like what coffee shops do. Hey, you're here, you bought a cup of coffee from us, here's the Wi-Fi password along with it. That becomes a part of your guest engagement process or your member engagement process. You get your welcome card, your visitor's card. Hey, thanks for visiting us. Oh, by the way, while you're in church today, there's actually free Wi-Fi available for you to go ahead and search for your biblical archives. And then, but in doing that, you definitely want to make sure that your landing page points back to your church. You don't want just people to just put in a Wi-Fi password and just
go wherever they want to go.
Go wherever they want to go. You want to use those jump screens to be able to say, hey, welcome to Rick Mansfield Church of the Moment. Download our sermons, go to the rest of the internet.
I hope there's never a Rick Mansfield Church of the Moment. I just say that.
Hey, Antoine, that's a good issue, because do most routers have the ability to set an automatic landing page when you connect?
Some of the newer ones do. I cannot recall the older ones.
I don't even know if DDWRT does that.
I know my cable modem does, which I thought was a pretty nifty.
Ask that again, Wes.
Like what Antoine said is when you give it out the guest network, you set up an automatic landing page. You connect, and it automatically opens up to, hi, welcome to our church.
Yeah.
A lot of older consumer routers don't do that. I don't even know that some of the open source firmwares are default to that. I'm sure I could hack something in for it.
Yeah, but most of the new ones have that feature built in, and they're not that expensive.
Yeah.
You can get a decent router for $50 now.
Get a nice ASUS.
If we're getting into hardware issues, let me share a couple of things. You guys sort of jumped off at the question of, well, we don't do it, and I want to steer it back to, let's say people say, I don't care, I'm going to do it. then what is your solution? And let me share a couple that we have used. This is one, Ubiquiti Networks. This is an enterprise level access point that you can piggyback on top of your network. So this solves a couple of problems. Number one, actually, it's a few things. Number one, it's very powerful. This thing covers most of my building, and we've got a much larger building than we have congregation, because back in the heyday of the evangelical church in America, we were averaging 350, and then 2 church splits later we're down below 100. Those happened years ago, and the church is still below that 100 mark. But anyway, so this is one solution. We have this set up in my office, and as a result, we can get Wi-Fi through most of the building. And then we put another one in our sanctuary, and then ran an Ethernet cable from the office to the sanctuary. And then people in Sunday school classes started saying they want network during Sunday school, and so we put one downstairs as well, just outside our youth room, which the youth were the ones that were wanting it the most. The youth teachers were wanting it the most. Now that caused a whole other problem that we may want to talk about. But so anyway, this is a good solution for that. It works great. It's very easy to set up. It's very powerful. When I say easy to set up, it's easy to set up for somebody who has some tech knowledge. The average ordinary guy probably would struggle with this, but probably everybody who says, I'm going to listen to a tech podcast about church technology, almost everybody listening to this or watching this would probably be able to figure it out. But this is Ubiquiti, Ubiquiti Networks Enterprise AP. It's the product is called Unify, and so these are really good. And this company makes really good materials. So we actually have 3 of these in our building.
Cool.
And what happens is when you put them all together, when you can make them so they all look like the exact same Wi-Fi.
It creates a mesh network.
Yeah, it's a mesh network. Thank you for using the term that I didn't think of. It's a mesh network, and so that makes it really useful. Here's the other thing. It also has the ability to set up both a private network that is password protected and a public network that cannot access, without some good hacking specs, chops, it cannot access anything on the private network. So in other words, my computer in my office, the computer in the sanctuary, those access the password protected network. This, we let people use the guest network, and they can't access one another either. And so all they can do is get on the internet with it. And so that's what we've used in our church for that. Now you talked about this.
That's exactly what my cable modem does right now too, Kevin. The cable modem I have from our apartment does the exact same thing.
Yeah. The difference is a lot of times those, your average router or cable modem from the company don't have the high gain antennas that can throw the signal over a very large area like this does. In fact, I can get this. I'm at home in my basement right now, so I've got dirt and walls keeping me from getting a network easily, and I'm about 200 yards from the church, and I can connect to this network. Now I can't surf on it because it's so low. The signal is so low where I'm at, but that just tells you how powerful it is. I'm about 200 yards from where this access point is in our sanctuary.
Where's your radiation shield, man?
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It's the reason is our sanctuary, the balcony is where it sits, and so it's way up high. That's why it's throwing so far. Okay, but most people and our church is isolated enough that I'm the only house close enough that it can get this signal. I actually drove around.
Yeah, if I put those things on my church, my neighbors would be just completely annoyed at me.
Yeah, so there's no one else. No one else in our neighborhood is. There's one other house that might be getting it, but based on what I know about those folks, they're probably not getting on the internet a whole lot. Anyway, so those are 2 hardware solutions that can allow it. And also, I think it's fairly secure. I'm not a security expert, so I don't know, but I like the fact that there's the public network that you can't access other stuff, and then there's the private network that can access one another, but the people on the public can't access the private or one another. And then the third thing is it's got some good filtering built in. We've set up some stuff so that people can't go in our router, not in this, but
Right.
in our router, we've set up things so that OpenDNS
Mhm.
not only gives us a faster internet connection, but it also has some good family filtering that you can turn on, and so and it's pretty good. It's not foolproof, but it's pretty good. So if people are looking for, you know, pornography or downloading wares, which is, you know, illegal software or something like that, they're not likely to be able to get to many of those kinds of sites through your church network. So it's not foolproof. You know, I've been in the sanctuary searching for graphics. You know, I'll do a Google public domain image search, and you know, I'll search for something that just seems innocuous, like Jesus on the cross, and you get some pretty ridiculous pictures on occasion when you do a search like that. But so you have to be careful. But anyway, that's my solution. Anybody else have any thoughts on this before we move on to the next one? Nope. Okay, good. Here's our next problem. The people who have planned your sanctuary setup have, for some strange reason, put the presentation PC in another room. So you can't even see the screen. Now they can hear things, so they can hear the songs to advance things. But what would you do to fix that? And by the way, the powers that be are very stubborn, and they've made it incredibly clear that they're not moving that computer into the sanctuary because they don't want that computer in the sanctuary.
Oh, I just use OpenLP. It's got remote functionality built into it. Hi, have fun.
What?
I said OpenLP's got remote functionality built into it.
Explain what that means.
Well, it creates, when you turn it on, it creates a web server that you can go to, and now it's password protected. It didn't used to be, but it's you can go in and administrate the whole thing, change songs, change slides, go through that whole thing.
The remote thing, though. That's what I think people may.
Well, basically, it puts out it starts a web server. You go to it on whatever device you have, phone, tablet, PC, and you connect to the same network, and you go to that website. It's basically the IP address of the machine, and you can control it through a web interface. Pretty cool.
All right. So how does that help me if I'm in another room?
Well, if the PC's in the other room, you just connect to the tablet, put it on the network, you connect to the tablet, and you can be in the sanctuary and run it from the PC or from the tablet.
That's what I was trying to get at. I was trying to make it that explicit.
Right,
So,
and then the same thing for Keynote. The only thing would have to be switched. Like I use 2 inputs, so I control my Keynote from my iPad. So I just use the Keynote remote functionality.
So you're suggesting remote functionality. What if a church is already heavily invested in some other piece of software? Can they do the same thing with say MediaShout or?
I don't know.
Hope
that MediaShout has the same functionality. I mean, I really don't know. How does MediaShout have that ability?
Through an app.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was trying not to sound like the expert here and let someone else chime in on this. There's 2 ways that I see doing this. Number one, if you have a program that has an app, then go with that. By the way, I'm showing the OpenLP website so people understand what we're looking at here. And this is free, right?
Yeah, open source.
Open source, so you can download and get it, and it has the ability that Wes was talking about, remote function. So what you do then is let's say you've got your iPad and you're sitting on the back row of the church so as not to be a distraction, and you've got good enough Wi-Fi in the building that you can do this, and you're connected to the computer that's in the other room behind the sanctuary, and you're controlling OpenLP from your tablet.
Yep.
And it goes through a web browser, you say?
Yeah, just through a web browser. And the cool thing is that you see that stage view thing there on the web page. That's what I use when I'm singing with our the worship band. I use slide view, and it just the slide changes and the web page updates automatically to the current lyrics. It's really cool, and it's nice and fast.
We mentioned MediaShout. MediaShout has an app. You actually download an app that connects to, here it is, MediaShout Remote right down here. And so that's another solution that you can run this app. It's $3. It used to be free. That's unfortunate. So they now charge for it because you're paying through the arm for the software. They ought to give that away free, in my opinion. But
OpenLP, baby.
yeah, that's maybe a better solution. If Pro Presenter, it looks like, has a similar remote app. Theirs is $4.99, so I guess Media Shout's cheap compared to.
Yeah, that's a terrible interface.
Yeah, it doesn't look good, but it's simple. You just bang on the slide to get it to go.
Yeah.
Proclaim Online, which we mentioned just a minute ago from Logos. Again, building your presentations in Proclaim Online is painful, but it has this functionality as well, a remote app that allows you to run it. But let's say you're just running PowerPoint. You could run a PowerPoint remote on an iPhone or an Android phone or a Windows phone. And then here's another thing. Find your favorite remote control software, and you can control the entire computer. I use Splashtop only because I got a year subscription reviewing it. It's not necessarily the best or worst solution, but it's the one I use. And you install a client on the computer in the other room, and then you also install the app on your tablet or PC or phone, and you can control everything in the computer, not just the software. Those other solutions are just controlling the software, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, this allows you to control everything on the computer. But what happens if something goes wrong in that computer? Then what do you think? What's the solution? You're out there controlling it in the sanctuary, but what if something goes wrong in that computer in the background?
Turn the screen off and keep going anyway.
Okay. What else? Is there another option?
I just want to say for the person, committee, group that is absolutely opposed to putting the computer in the sanctuary for whatever reasons. I guess they think it's too holy of a place for technology. Besides telling them to get over themselves, I'd say, okay, well, we can't use electric lights. That's technology. We can't use any amplification of our voices. That's technology. We can't use our glasses to read text because that's technology.
You can't use the print Bible. It's technology.
That's technology.
Well, you're right, and that's the obvious solution is for people to quit.
Right, or be in a building.
The other thing is maybe their thing is, no, it's not because we don't want it in there. It's because we don't have any money to rerun the lines to get it. Someone made this mistake, and now we're stuck with it. And again, your solution that you said earlier, well, just don't use it. I think that there are good alternatives that say, yes, we can still use it. We may not be able to afford, so let's get free OpenLP.
Yeah.
And do that. That's a great solution. But the problem that I'm trying to get at is, what if something weird happens on that computer and there's nobody back there? My point that I was trying to get one of you guys to suggest was have someone back there and have someone out in the front, and have them where they can communicate with one another in a non-distracting way. Text message, a chat session on the computer and the tablet or something like that. So always have someone at that remote computer behind.
Yeah, and I get it, but it's. And I've done that. Like when I'm working at a drama performance or something, we'll communicate in text message. Like I've been on backstage, and the guy who's running sound is in the, up in the balcony. But we're talking about worship. You get to go and sit in front of a computer that's not in the sanctuary, and you're cut off. And what if you're taking communion, and now you're in the other room? To me, it's just, if the computer dies, just rather than having to have somebody not be present in worship because we need to make sure that the tech is running, just turn the tech off.
Well, you could say
the biggest geek
nursery then.
Well, and that's the great struggle that I have with nursery, is that so many people who are in the nursery are cut out of worship. Now, some people.
What you do is make sure you have a rotation of people so that no one person is always
there, or make sure that you have a time where the kids are going to be in worship, instead of cutting them off from the idea that we're an actual community and shoving them down into a room where they can play. Start them from a very young age. You're actually part of this.
Yeah.
And well, what if they cry? Well, has anybody read Psalm 8? There's a lot of the things about the nature of the North American church, because of the way that we've developed as a society, that I just don't think makes sense theologically.
Okay. Well, we're not going to get into that. That's
I
a
know.
whole other discussion.
That's a whole other issue.
Have that on another podcast. La Rosa or Antoine, you haven't chimed in on this one yet. Either of you have some thoughts that you want to share?
I can honestly say I don't have any thoughts that I'd share there. I haven't been in the side. I'm probably edging a little bit more over towards what Wes was saying there. Is, you know, if it's the computer's not in a sanctuary and or it's not working, it's probably not useful. And I mean, I know I'm usually a little bit further out there than most, but if you can't add, if your sanctuary, if you're not able to admin your AV and your presentation tech from inside the sanctuary while it's happening, you really are taking the gift of AV, the gift of serving in AV. You're taking that away from your community, and you know, God didn't take away the Masons from the Masons and the artisans and the seamstress. He didn't take those folks away from the area around the tent, around the holy place, because their job had to go in another room. He included them into that worship, and so some way, shape, or form, that tech, if it's not in the right place, using something like an open LP or even turning it into its own, you know, just flat out just turn it into a server so you can access it from elsewhere. Mobile devices, tablet devices are all powerful enough, and it's worth the learning curve to figure that out so that that computer, or at least the information on that computer, doesn't take any kind of administrator or any kind of person away from the rest of the community. I think so, at least.
Yeah. Kev, I have an interesting question to throw out, if I might. You're muted. Sorry, bud.
Is it a separate technology issue?
Yeah, it's another question about technology.
Well, we're kind of running. We don't really have time for a fourth one. If you can hit it real quick, I still want to give La Rosa, if he had any thoughts.
Okay.
No. Okay. All right. Throw it out real quick and see if we can.
What if you're in a context where you want to add some AV to worship, and you literally are in a environment where there is no good place to put a projection screen and projector setup? What do you do? And here's where Antoine can jump in.
Then you do not put a projector up.
But you do want to add AV, so what do you do, Antoine?
Okay, so wireless everything. You know, so everything from, gosh, the application just ran across my head. There's a new iPad app that's out that allows you to share content from your iPad to everybody else who has an iDevice. You have your Tron Smart and your Apple TV, you know, type devices which work like a content server. Mm-hmm. Or if you really want to be crazy with it, turn your Android phone or Android tablet or Windows tablet into accessible server using either a server software so that people can log into your device temporarily and get that content. But you're not at the behest of having a projector by any means, ever.
You know, one thing that we've done in our church is we've got 2 or 3 of these little mobile carts that have it's probably like a, you know, this is for classroom use. Mm-hmm. They have about 30-inch flat screen TVs. Yeah. They've got an Apple TV that you can connect wirelessly to if you have a Mac, or an iOS device, and they have, I think they still have like a DVD player, because some church curriculum sometimes will have a DVD segment or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that's something that can be taken in and out of a room if the room is small enough. You know, you're not going to want to do that in a large sanctuary because no one's going to be able to see it. But those type of portable solutions work very well in those contexts too.
Yeah, and I asked this because I've actually been called in to do tech consults for churches. Like, well, we want to put in a projection screen because that's what, you know, successful churches do. And they're in the sanctuary is like a 19th century Methodist bowl revival meeting sanctuary. And you know, the organ is 2 stories tall, and there's 3 choir lofts, and there's no good place to put it. And yet they want to add AV. And that's the question. So I wanted Antoine to highlight that, is that they're in their infancy right now, but there's ways to bypass the need to have one central screen where everybody's looking at, and to get people onto the point where they're able to kind of look at their own personal devices, or oh my gosh, in church we can look at our neighbor's device and be able to share some content that way. It's not the paradigm's completely different, but it's a way to do it. OpenLP with the stage view is one way to do lyrics. But it is possible. It needs a lot of forethought to do.
There's a whole bunch of apps, in whatever app store you're interested in, like this one. That I don't even know anything about this. I just searched. If you search for Whiteboard app in your app store, you're going to find a lot of these. My thought was that this would be the kind of thing that I would screencast so that I could do whiteboarding as a presentation model,
right.
Having a chalkboard, and it works like that. But it also has a situation where you can share with people.
Yep.
And so they can actually have the app on their thing, and they can see you writing live as well. So that's one solution. I don't think that would be very practical for a worship setting, but it might be
classroom setting.
Classroom setting. But then again, it might be useful in a worship setting. The problem is, to get the full feature. Look down here on this one.
How much does it cost?
It says $11.99 a month or $99.99 a year.
There are some that are.
But there's free ones.
Yeah.
You don't need this one. This is just the first one that popped up in Google search. And I have no experience with it, so I'm not at all recommending it. And at that price, in fact, I would say don't waste your money. Get something else. But the point is, use something like this that's possible. And again, that gets to what we said earlier about what if the projector's sort of going out slowly. Use other solutions. Download a PDF or a deck of slides, or use Bible version or YouVersion's Bible app. Proclaim online. Their Logos is Proclaim solution. There's lots of different ways that you can go about that. Well, guys, I think this was a good discussion, and just kind of closing out what we're going to do the next couple of weeks. We've only got probably 2 more for the year. As I was looking at the calendar, the 11th and 18th are the next 2 Fridays, and following week is, that's Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's true. After that is New Year's Day, and personally, I don't plan on doing a podcast on either one of those days. If you guys want to, then you have fun. I'm not going to.
I will be unavailable.
So we'll jump back on in January, but we've got 2 more weeks, and probably what we'll do next week is some Christmas gift ideas, technology related, and then after that, maybe we'll do some looking back and looking forward to the tech of the past year, which we kind of did last week, but then looking forward to predictions and ideas of what's coming. And that's when we'll definitely need...
It's going to snow next Friday.
Antoine, we'll desperately need Antoine in 2 weeks, brother, so you can tell us what's going to happen since you come to us from the future.
It's going to snow in 2 weeks. No, sorry, next Friday it's going to snow.
Is it going to snow?
Knows that. It's going to snow.
Well, good. Everybody stay home and watch Theotek.
Did
This has been great. We enjoyed doing this with you guys. We had a lot of fun today, and we always enjoy doing it. And we hope that you'll share the word, spread the word, that you'll subscribe to us on YouTube if that's where you're watching, or if it's not, go find us on YouTube. You can go to theotek.com, theotek.com, and find all those links to where to go to find that. You can also watch us after the fact on my website, kevinpurcell.org. And sometimes these guys post links through their social media. And then you can listen through iTunes or Stitcher Radio or most podcast apps on any platform because of Stitcher Radio making that available. And we hope that you'll subscribe that way. Feel free to always hit us up and let us know what's on your mind through comments in our videos or on the web pages that we post these things. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. We do get email from people, and most of the time I just can answer those questions one-on-one, and so that's how I do it. But we're happy if you have a question or a thought you want us to share online, just let us know, and we'll be happy to try to accommodate that as well. But, guys, thanks for being with us this morning.
See you later.
All right.
I have to show my shirt.
Unshut it first.
Yeah, oh, you know what I have to show? If you'll indulge me for just 1 second. is I want to give a testimony of a miracle that I experienced recently, and it's something incredibly exciting that the whole world really ought to be celebrating, and that is the most amazing play in
That
the
was
history
pretty
of the
amazing
NFL last night.
I saw it on the news this morning.
What happened?
As a Packer fan,
The refs
just go over to
the refs beat- the
Packers.com and
refs
you'll
beat
find
the
out about it.
Lions.
Face mask.
The
Yeah.
referees beat the Lions. That's what happened.
All right.
The non-face mask penalty.
We're done. Thanks, guys.